Disclaimer: the information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GAN's processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
Thank you all for joining us and continuing in this process, and how easy it is to work through the dimension of energy. It doesn't take a lot of work, and it's not hard work. And again, it's a test for us. As Mr. Kesh said, one of the beautiful parts of this is nobody fails this test. So congratulations, we all passed. And now let's move on to the part of the program everyone's been waiting for, that we get to interact with Alex from Canada. And Alex, if I haven't put you to sleep, I hope you're ready to come in and join us in another beautiful teaching of the knowledge.
Yes, I am. And so thank you very much, Mark, for bringing the troops here. I want to thank everybody for allowing me to continue to make these presentations and stick it out with me here. And especially I want to thank all the people from the other continents, because that's what makes this meeting so powerful. And what we're trying to do is to follow up on the rapid movement with respect to the Knowledge Seekers workshops, which we honestly have no hope of keeping up with. However, what we are trying to do is to create a platform where we can invite and make it open for new knowledge seekers, those who haven't been around for the 526 weeks. And how do you catch up when we keep going farther and farther away? And so that's a challenge. And there are many ways to do this, and hopefully through these teachings, we can assist in that process. But all of you are assisting in your own way, and let's not underestimate how important that is. So, if I may, I'll begin the disclaimer, and thank you all. And again, thank you very much, everyone, for being here. We are in a new era where Mr. Kesh has said we have no choice. Well, that's not exactly true. We do have a choice. And that choice is to bring peace and prosperity to this planet. Isn't that a choice? So, what we'd like to say is welcome on this beautiful Sunday afternoon to the Kesh American Knowledge Team meeting. This is the Kesh Foundation Spaceship Institute Teachings on Plasma Science. We are discussing the intermediate transmission subject, and specifically coexistence today. My name is Alexander. I am from Canada, and it is February the 25th of 2024, and this is the Kesh Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. So as we said, this is not just for the mature students, it's for all the new students as well. What we're trying to do is distill all this many thousands of hours of teaching that has come over the years and try and put it forward in shall we say, more layman's terms, if you will. But, we all have to remember that we're talking about advanced science. And one of the specific characteristics of advanced science is that it's advanced. So we wonder why there's a lot of hesitancy to that, because we want to try and relate to something that we understand and know. And of course, that's not advanced. That just makes us comfortable. And in that comfort, we actually are in the lowest energy state. And so we started walking in that energy state, and we found that rolling is faster. And so we see that life is hard until you say you get up on the horse. And of course, that comes from the fact that the horse walking is faster than the man walking. But either way, regardless of the vehicle, we're going step by step or step by cycle. And then we have to question how many steps and how many cycles. And as we manifest things, we have to decide what are the ingredients and what is the recipe. And then we find that it doesn't matter the ingredients and it doesn't matter the recipe. The cook has a strong say in that matter. And of course, the cook is using a filter. And the most important thing is the purity. But it's also the input from the cook and how they see it and how they interpret that knowledge. And so it becomes a very individual thing, highly subjective. And yet we all have this capability and we all share it. So here we have something that is very unique and yet something that is ubiquitous. And so we see in the books of Marantava Kolikesh, book number 1, The Universal Order of Creation of Matter. And so this becomes the most important thing, where we see the convergence of matter, dark matter, and antimatter, the convergence of these energies into one field. And they are converging together, which means that they traveled. And so we see in book number 2, the structure of the light. And why the structure of the light and not the structure of the matter? Well, because the light and the matter are one and the same thing. All of the features change, the conformity changes, the manifestation changes, the matter state changes, but the structure of the light remains true. And so as it comes, it also goes. And when it goes to another field. And that's what we see in book number 3, The Origin of the Universe, where what we have is the creation of 2 fields from the one field. And the reason for that is because we have exceeded the force fields of containment. And so this is how things grow, how things multiply, and how we progress. And this is all part of the process, whether we acknowledge it or not. And so that becomes the limitation, you see. So now we're in the transmutation preparation sessions, and we're trying to organize every 3rd or 4th Friday of the month. And in this month coming up is going to be the 4th month, rather, sorry, the 4th week of the month. And this will be the 3rd session that's coming up. And it's a set of 6. And this is an interesting number. So it's an arbitrary number, actually, in many ways, because it gives everyone the opportunity to gradually, shall we say, grow into. However, there are fast learners, they may not need 6 sessions. And then there are slow learners, and they may need 60 sessions. So this is not a matter of criticism. It's just a matter of gracefully allowing things to progress. And so we've been trying for 314 weeks to deliver the one nation, one planet, one race for justice and world peace. every Tuesday. And the reason we're doing that is because when you look into the universe, you see this greater oneness. And you see peace. Well, actually, you don't see peace because everything's peaceful. You don't see churches, hospitals, box stores, cars, rockets, courts, and prisons. And so that's what we notice. We don't see the peace because we're so used to not seeing the peace on earth. And so what we have to understand is one planet, one nation, one race for justice and world peace is mandatory if we're going to complete our search for outer space, to get to that plasma highway, to the coexistence with that little pie in the sky we call our home. But there's another pie beyond. And where is that exactly? And it's a big map. And the only thing that we recognize is that little red dot in the bottom right-hand corner, which we call our little tiny perfect world. So how do we get on this plasma highway? And what does it mean exactly? Well, we're not there yet, not in this discussion, because we're still on the transmission highway. And the transmission highway is a very important highway because it's indicative of how things operate. So we are here. We are on this transmission highway. So it would be really good to know how we got here. And it would be even better to know where we're going. Because you see, the problem in understanding has been how we understand the universal embodiment. And so we say the speed of light is the fastest transmission. Well, is that true? Well, we don't know anything that goes faster than the speed of light. And so everything that we see is reflecting that light. So everything that we see is within the speed of light. And because it's everything and everything is way bigger than everything that we have, so if everything is traveling at the speed of light and everything is huge, then as we approach the speed of light, we must be getting bigger. And now we have to question if that is true. But then there's another question. What is beyond that? So our understanding, of course, is our Earth space, because this was our landing point. So forget about where we came from to get to this landing point. But let's understand that the Earth has this curvature. And as such, it has this density. And so we find that the ground is below, and then there's the water, then there's the atmosphere, and then there's beyond the atmosphere. And we seem to do our transmission the same way. So we have some people bury in the ground and burrow and run tunnels. Then there are ships. Some are submarines that are below the water. Some are on top of the water. And then there are airplanes that go faster than ships. And so they have to fly in the sky. But then there are warplanes that go much faster than commercial airplanes. And so they have to fly even higher, where it's less dense. And then we get into an area that seems to be like the Peace Dome, where we all seem to go when we go to sleep. And then there's an area above where there are satellites, and they go faster as well. And then there's still an area beyond. And in that area beyond, you can leave this planet. And so we find that as we go from the ground up, we go faster and faster. And since we go faster and faster, we need more space. And so we understand, even though the satellites have to travel a longer distance, they navigate around this Earth way faster than ships and submarines. So this is one way to understand transmission. But do we understand the creation of the universe? And so we have to understand that as we go faster and faster, we input more energy. Well, the universe, since it's so big, exists from energy. And because it exists, it is always positive. So the energy charge is the energy in motion. And energy is always in motion. And why is energy in motion? This is a good question. So when we look at the universal order of creation of matters of book number 1, and we see the culmination of the 3 matters coming together into one field, which we call a maggraph, and then we see if they came together, well, then they have to keep in motion. So either they can stay within that field or they can go to another field. And so we can conclude that all things are working in combination all the time, because energy is always in motion. And so the motion of this energy is what we call transmission. And so we are on the transmission highway. But right now, we're not anywhere near the plasma highway as such, except in some smaller details, which were exhibited to us in the cups of life. And remember, these were created during the pandemic, but they were not named the cups of the pandemic because they were representative of our inner strength, which consists of our emotional strength, obviously, and of our physical strength. And so we have a physical cup and we have an emotional cup, and then we have the combination of the two. And in this process, we created many ganses, the most significant of which for our purposes was the carbon dioxide GANS, the calcium GANS, copper and zinc GANS, water GANS, and amino acid GANS. And so these are all GANSes. And so they have a radiance manifestation, and they were part of the creation, and they were not in the cups. We did not put them in the cups. What we put in the cups was something that was of a physical manifestation. But interestingly enough, everyone produced different quantities of ganses and different types of ganses, even different colors. And so there was something else at play. And obviously, the chef who had the ingredients and who had the recipe still had a huge part to play. And speaking of huge, this is the problem that we have, because when we're trying to make relationships, we have to take into account the dimension effects. So, when we look at the x-axis transmission, the y-axis and its dimension affects it. But then, of course, the reverse is true. For the y-axis transmission, the x-axis dimension also affects it. And so distance and time have a factor. So in time, we talk about step by step, and in terms of distance, we talk about the length of the foot. Well, whose foot? And this became a problem. So we had to pick a foot. And that's the only way that we can describe the relationship between the x-axis and the y-axis dimension, because all we had to look at was the length and the height. It was only 2 dimensions. But, that's good for our body, but our body is the containment for our soul. And That's not taken into account, is it? So there are other criteria of a relationship. And so we can just dumb it down and say, well, it depends on what you include or what you exclude. It's obviously very subjective, also selective. And of course, that selectivity is based on prejudice, and we're all prejudiced. But, at the bottom of the whole thing, in terms of criteria, is the purpose of the reference. And purpose is not something that we're all clear on. So when we're looking for clarity, it's hard to get this clarity when we don't even understand the dilution of plasma. And so on page 154 of book number 1, there's an attempt to talk about the inception of plasma, where the antimatter components of the plasma were created by the stronger plasmatic magnetic fields. And the future is plasmatic magnetical fields based through the production of controlled plasmatic dilution technology reactors. Well, these technology reactors were cup 1 and cup 2, and many other cups that we produced. And that's what we were able to create from the physical state. So that takes care of the second paragraph, but we're still having trouble with the first paragraph. But at least we know that there are plasmatic magnetic fields that are affecting this transmission. And in so, we didn't do this, we used this. We acknowledged a periodic table of elements. And as my dear Watson learned about elementary elements, is that life is much more complex. And so we're confused when we put the parts together, and the sum of those parts is actually greater than the sum of the individual parts. And that's the difference about knowing the details or the details of knowing. So this is what we're talking about. Inertia is said to be a total collection of PM ticks of the constituent matters of atoms and molecules of an object. Good. Interacting and attracting with each other. Good. And any other matters. Okay. Or matters. Okay. Or matter. Or magraphs. So the principle of inertia is applicable to the dark matters and the antimatters as well as, of course, the matter components of the plasma in the universe. Small statement, but here you go. And we've only looked at some of the items that are relevant to us in our public teachings, the periodic table of elements, but all of these elements are part of the dilution of all the energies in the universe, and they've come about to be quite specific. And so, the most important one, of course, is hydrogen, because that's number 1. And the truth about being number 1 is that only one can be number 1. The rest are not number 1. They can be any other number. And so we see 3 others like carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen. And together with the hydrogen, they form one structure, and that one structure is the amino acids. And so we understand that as a combination of these elements. And of course, we don't understand how they work together. We just understand the ingredients. So that's the limitation. And so today we're talking about coexistence. And so coexistence implies inertia, and inertia means nearness and proximity. And that's the nearness and proximity of 2 fields that are interacting. Well, we didn't say which 2 fields. We're just talking about coexistence for now. So in that terminology, we see that we've had to modify our terminology because the transmission involves rotation as part of the x-axis, and the transition involves polarity. because the Earth rotates on its axis and the axis is on the y-axis. But the fact of the matter is that the transmission has to go on the x-axis and the y-axis in combination, and this becomes part of the transmission dimension. So when we look at these dimensions, it's the transmission dimension is the combination of the x-axis dimension and the y-axis dimension, which is the culmination of two forces coming together. And so before these forces came together, there was no Magrath. The Magrath manifested after these two forces came together. And so once we had the creation of matter, and matter was positive, then we created these dimensions, these two dimensions, and they progressed. So not only in terms of density, but also in terms of motion. And so this became the embodiment of field capture. And so we still see the x-axis transmission, which is parallel to the ground, and the y-axis transmission, which we said was perpendicular to the ground. But as you can see, there's a difference in position and there's a difference in density. So what is the difference? How does that happen? So we've been discussing for the past 12 weeks how we can roll along this x-axis transmission. So we understand that that's perpendicular to the ground. And since it rotates, well, one rotation is one cycle and it can roll on the ground. And it's really good that it rolls because that makes it a lot easier to move. And yet we find that if we are on a slope and we have a car with wheels where the wheels are rotating perpendicular to the ground, that car will move. But if we're on a flat surface, there will be no motion. So there has to be an input rotation. And the output motion is aligned with that rotation. And so in that case, the car becomes the containment for your body. And then, of course, there's a change in position. And so wherever it is, there's this output motion, which is predicated by the input motion. And the input motion is the input rotation, which is perpendicular to the ground. And so the difference in position along the x-axis is a transmission. And so that car can move. And interestingly enough, it has to keep moving, and you can see it in its motion. And then from there, it has to move again, and you can see it. And then from there, it has to move again, and you can see it. And I tend to repeat myself because that's the nature of motion. It keeps moving. And so there has to be an input of energy and an output of energy. And then we find that the transmission is a two-way street. Well, that's okay. We have two dimensions. But what we're talking about is a two-way street on each dimension. And that means two directions. And then we find that we can have two different sizes as part of that transmission, or we can have two variables. And so these are all part and parcel of understanding two-way transmission. And do you think about two-way transmission when you get into your car and go to the grocery store? But, you know, as a scientist or as a carpenter or as an engineer, you have to understand these cycle relationships where it's the diameter versus the circumference. And the answer is pi. And then when we look at the cycles, so like on this bicycle, you have pedal cycles, you have a small wheel cycle and a big wheel cycle. And so they're all different. They all have different diameters. And as a result, they all have a different circumference. Different, 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 same. Pi. Pi is the relationship. So you can change the diameter, you can change the circumference, and the relationship is always pi. Back to pi. And so we see that other than pi, there's a charge, right? Because that energy is in motion, and that energy is either negative or positive. So as we've discussed, that energy can be flowing or it can be binding. And so the flowing and the binding incorporates giving and taking. And so we identify that the negative gives and the positive takes. So in terms of binding, the negative and the positive gives and takes from itself. But in terms of flowing, the negative and the positive gives and takes from others. As we said, it's a two-way street. So we have to keep that in mind. But what we also have to keep in mind, as according to Herman Weyl, that there's no such thing as one and the same energy which constitutes a charge at two adjacent increments of time. So the energy is not the same. It's just like a car is not the same. A person is not the same. So if I say a car, someone may think of a blue car and someone may think of a racing car. So that is not enough information to fulfill the criteria of that manifestation. And then we can change this and just spin along. But if we're going to spin, we have to spin on the y-axis. And if we move, we have to move on the x-axis. And so this is how the x-axis transmission and the y-axis transmission works together. But we still don't know now what the difference is in the position, because clearly we're moving. And so when we look at how we measure movement, we find that there's a relationship in colors. And that has to do with the wavelength and the frequency, but there's a relationship there. And that relationship changes as the color changes. So we find that the wavelength, as it moves from a violet to red, increases, but the frequency decreases. And then the opposite is true. It's a two-way street, remember? And so the answer is always constant. And so this becomes a real sticking point, because how can everything be constant and still have a variety? And then there's Planck's constant, another constant. Okay, and so it's identified as a universal constant, right? And it's a product of energy multiplied by time. And so we have time and distance, meters per kilometer per second units. And there's a number, and it's constant. So we have pi, we have Planck's constants, and we have the speed of light, all constant. And yet we have such diversity. So when we look at this diversity and how it comes together, we find that, well, first of all, we have different energy states that change by an order of magnitude, which is not constant. And the higher energy state feeds the lower energy state. So these are two energy states and they're not constant. And they can change through natural creation or natural decay. And we know that's not constant. But there is something that is constant, and that's the catalytic or non-consuming energy transfer, such as the sun. So even the sun, for purposes of this discussion, is constant. And then we find, as we said, the higher we go, the faster we go. So the energy transfer rates are also higher in the higher plasma state, and by many orders of magnitude. So now when we see these rules and how they play together, then one of two things happen. We see that the plasma can absorb fields, or the plasma can be a barrier of fields. And there's this duplicity again, you know? And which is which, and when is it which? And so if we try and graph this, we see that in terms of the field and how it rolls along, we want to measure the distance by the x-axis dimension. But, you know, in terms of the energy input, there's a positive and negative energy input on the y-axis. And so this is what facilitates the rolling perpendicular to the ground. And we know this is true because even if we subscribe to the flat Earth theory, we can clearly see that, well, there are mountains and they're not flat, and we can see that there are valleys, and definitely they're not flat. And did we talk about the planes and the satellites and ships? And you know, that's, you know, not even part of this equation here. And then there was this transmission where we seen the x-axis frequency, which was, shall we say, interesting. And then there was this y-axis amplitude, which notably went from a curvy or a flat or a jagged type of personality. Something was happening. And so we see that if we understand the nature of a maggrav and the transmission of that maggrav, then we understand that in order to be stable, we have to be more complex. That is to say, if it's very simple, it's very unstable. And this determines the magnetical strength and the gravitational strength. And the relationship of these two field strengths is what we call inertia. And so that becomes part of the transmission maggrav. Now we have a foundation. Now we have a basis. And this is important because it's part of the energy binding, which we need as individuals. We need the self-serving energy binding. So I need it, and then the other person needed it. But if I decide to steal from that other person, so to satisfy my energy binding need, but if I do it at the expense of others, then they would be compromised in satisfying their energy binding self-serving need. And, well, they may have to steal from someone else. Or they may decide to fight you. So this activity is actually energy draining, energy sapping, and is limiting with respect to our progress. And our progress is we're trying to fulfill this transmission. And so when we look at how do we get from here to there, so we take into account time and distance, right? That's the difference in position. But is it? Because really, it all has to do with the frequency, which is times the cycles. So that's your time. But then you have your wavelength times your frequency, and that's the distance. Well, that's good. Now we can measure the difference in the position, but that doesn't answer many other questions. So if we say the x-axis is the rotating field and the y-axis is the polarity, and we look at the Earth and how it moves, that doesn't account for it either. And so there's something that's going on in that field that we're not taking into account. So we have to understand that there's more, because there's a binding energy transmission. And not only is there more, but there's more still after that. And this is all absorbed into the Earth through the properties of attraction. And this facilitates gravitational stability, right? And now we have to move. So how do we maintain this gravitational stability? We have to have energy coming in, absorbed, right, through attraction. But we don't see it. But we know it's a fundamental component of the movement. And then to facilitate the energy coming in, there has to be an elevating energy transmitted out, and more has to go out, what we call emission through the forces of repulsion. And this facilitates magnetical stability. So the key point here is that we have stability that is either gravitational stable or magnetically stable. And so we resolve this because we see how we measure the time and the distance. So the energy comes in and the energy goes out, and the car can move. And we repeat this cycle over and over and over and over again. And so we're able to move from point 1 to point 1A, which is the same car. It's just in a different location, time and place. And we now see that it can move. So there's this energy that is coming and going, right? And that energy isn't necessarily in sequence, because there's a lot of things that are going on that we're not taking into account. So there may be some gaps, and yet we can still keep moving. So what's going on in those gaps? And so there are conditions. And these conditions could be rain or snow. And as they say, we still got to go. But these are overlapping conditions. And they're overlapping day and night. So the weather's fine, the weather's rainy, the weather's cold, the weather's snowy, and these are all overlapping conditions. So our point of view needs to be, shall we say, polished. And so we had a Greek philosopher named Socrates. He was credited as the founder of Western philosophy, and among the first moral philosophers of the ethical tradition. I'm choking on this description. The ethical tradition of thought. He is best known for his association with the Socratic method of question and answer. His claim that he was ignorant or aware of his own absence of knowledge, and his claim that the unexamined life is not worth living for human beings. And in his era, we didn't have TVs or other social media. So gathering together at in an evening at a person's home and debating the moral philosophies and ethical traditions was a pastime. And Socrates was a master debater. And this classical skill is revered by the legal community. And so today we have the discussion of whether red is red or blue is blue. As if that's a discussion to be worth having. And then we have other discussions. We call them competitions. We have beauty pageants, sporting trophies, car or horse races, or even camel races. Then there's a space race. And of course, we have human races. And we have wars, and we have colonialism. And who cares to be the winner? And the winner is, well, if you look into outer space and the way the universe is created, then you answer, who cares? So last week we talked about the transmission proximity, which means you want to go from position 1 to 1A, but your neighbor is in position 2, and he wants to go to position 2A. So the question is the energy that you're absorbing and emitting the same energy that he's absorbing and emitting? So for the purposes of understanding time and distance and the difference in position, you could argue and say yes. But the fact of the matter is that you is you and he is he, and your car is your car and that car is that car, not the same. So how are you able to drive on the road together in your lane? Oh, well, that's the first thing. We have 2 lanes. That would make it much easier. Okay, so now we have more variables. And so we can have 2 lanes of 2 dimensions and 2-way streets and 2 directions, 2 sizes, and still perform in the x-axis dimension and the y-axis dimension. And of course, we still have horses and we still can walk. And if we can get on the horse, and the horse walks faster than we do, but if we get in the car, we can go even faster. So everything has to do with a relationship. And these relationships we call as a coexistence, because you, the horse, and the car all coexist within the same matter state. And we have to absorb and emit energy, and we have to move. We have to move. And we have to keep moving. So the coexistence relationship, most importantly, is this coexistence versus motion. And we like to say winners and losers, or the elites versus the untouchables, the fastest versus the slowest, or purpose and meaning. And since we don't understand this coexistence, it's hard to interpret purpose and meaning. And so from this unknown survey that was done in 2017 of people aged between 18 and 29, we found an alarmingly high percentage of people think that their lives are meaningless and without purpose. And I believe now, 7 years later, that these numbers are probably even higher, which is a global tragedy, because how can life be purposeless and meaningless? Is the sun purposeless? But what about that moon and Mars and all those places in between? These are all part of the overlapping coexistence, right? And how do you contain these fields, and how do you judge this proximity? And all of them are sharing the same 2-lane highway. Well, it's more than just a 2-lane highway, isn't it? It's a pretty big highway, and it's doing an awful lot. So something somewhere is filtering. And when we say filter, that it means either filter to keep it in or filter to keep it out. So that means we're seeking some kind of purity of feeding or feedback. And that filter could be anything, not just a coffee filter. So when we look at this transmission coexistence anomaly, we're just going to change things up. And the buddy there who was driving beside us on the highway is now in front of us. Well, he's in our way because we want to go from position 1 to position 1A, and buddy there, number 2, is in between. So in order for us to keep moving, buddy number 2 has to keep moving. And in order for buddy number 2 to keep moving, he has to make sure that he stays ahead of me, because he doesn't want to run into me at position 1A in front of him. So likewise, like we said, with a 2-lane highway, we have energy coming in and energy going out, but so does buddy in number 2. He has the same energy. And so to make the traffic flow on this highway, he has to keep moving so that I can keep moving. And as I keep moving, I will fulfill my goal of going from position 1 to position 1A. I don't care what his goal is. I just care that he gets out of my way, right? This is pretty important. Well, speaking of that 2-lane highway, now we have buddy number 3, and he has kind of the same problem. He wants to go from position 3 to position 3A, but buddy number 4 is in his way. Well, same problem, same solution. Number 4 has to keep moving so that he gets to position 3A before the buddy in number 3 gets to 3A. And buddy number 3 can only keep moving if buddy number 4 it keeps moving. Well, this is good. Okay, so the same situation happens, but the question then becomes is, we understand that the motion is created by energy absorption. And so is the energy that buddy number 2 gets from wherever the same energy? Well, no, it's not, because it's filtered. And so clearly, if number 2 is filtered, then number 3 is filtered and number 4 is filtered. But the fact of the matter is that we all get enough energy, all 4 of us, to do this transmission, and we all have to do it together. Otherwise, we won't be moving. We'll be stuck in traffic. It'd be called a traffic jam. So to keep things moving, we have to hope that car number 2 and car number 4 keep moving, so car number 1 can achieve his destination of 1A, and car number 3 can achieve his destination of 3A. But then there's another coexistence anomaly as part of this transmission, is that each car has a different driver. So to go from position 1 to position 1A, the car remains the same and the driver remains the same. But to pass through car number 2, which is different from car number 1, and driver number 2, who is different from car number 1, has to move. And he has to move through that position. So the question then becomes is, how can I, in car number 1, get to car position 1A when this guy's in my way? I can't go over him. I can't go around him because car number 3 and car number 4 are blocking me. Where's the connection? And is my connection any different? Well, the filtering of the energy is different, but the answer, the input of energy and the emission of energy to maintain the motion is the same as car number 1 and car number 3. So as I want to go from position 1 to position 1A without running over car number 2, so does car number 3 want to get to position 3A without running over car number 4. And of course, car number 2 and car number 4, well, you know, they have their own purpose, right? So to understand that we're all different drivers and we're moving along with the car, but we exist. We exist collectively as drivers, and the cars exist collectively as cars. And so there's a coexistence. And so to exist, all have to absorb and emit energy. And to move, they all have to emit and absorb energy. And so the emission and absorption of energy is part of the transmission coexistence. So coexistence is a relationship. And there's a feeding coexistence, and there's a motion feeding and coexistence. Likewise, there's a feedback coexistence. And so likewise, there's a motion feedback and coexistence. So when we talk about coexistence, we have to take into account motion. And so the relationship between coexistence and motion is the discussion. So when we look at the earth space embodiment, which is our stability, we find that the math space is undependable, right? Because there's 8 billion of us, so there's too many variables. The earth space is that common denominator for us. The earth space is definitely more dependable, isn't it? And so we find that the earth, as it rotates, not only rotates around its y-axis pole, it also rotates collectively around the sun. And so the earth is a magrav, and the cycles are magrav dependent. And of course, the frequencies of those cycles are also magrav dependent. So the containment of everything is magrav dependent. And this is all based on nearness and proximity and coexistence filtering, right? Because something is something as opposed to something else. So the field is part of the Gans binding. And so there's an excessive input which causes the rotation. And in order to have a field release, we have to have an extreme offsetting of this energy. And it has to be stable. So what we're seeking is plasma stability. And so we need to start being the fans of man. Stop fighting and bring world peace, and understand the nature of transmission has to do with the release of the binding energy. And this precedes the retrieval of the beneficial energy. So field release precedes field capture. So the giving precedes the taking. Emission precedes the absorption. And motion itself cannot exist without coexistence, because motion is a product of existence. And motion and coexistence reside in both matter states. There's the plasma dominant matter state and the physically dominant matter state. And the plasma dominant state precedes the physical dominant matter state. And we know this because of the magnetical positioning of the hydrogen spectrum, which is a product of the coexistence of the gravitational field forces of the sun interacting with the gravitational field forces of the earth. And then we get this uniqueness, this hydrogen spectrum. And that hydrogen spectrum is constant. So what is the center of this dimension? Okay, so we know that it's not man-space centric. And it's probably Earth space centric with respect to our current position, right? And when we look at the sun space, well, we can't conclude anything there because we're still in our Earth space. But we understand that the containment is dimension centric and that proximity is dimension centric. But now we have motion and coexistence, and they're transdimensional. Because the motion and coexistence was there before, and the motion and coexistence is there after. So when we talk about the matter-plasma dimension, one is the feeding dimension and one is the feedback dimension. And our problem is that we are feedback dominant because we rely exclusively on what we can see and what we can touch. And we ignore the rest, even though we understand that there's a coexistence positioning, right? We can say we have a one-track mental binding as a containment, but we understand that we also have this excessive emotional input and this extreme output, this extreme offsetting of ideas, wishes, courage, and love. And so these are all part of the field release cycles from a containment. And when we give, we still exist. So what we exist coexists with us. What we haven't determined is its position. Because we've only done half the chore, and that's to give. And so when we look at the post-November the 11th, 2023 era of choices, we have choices. And that choice is actually no choice. That choice is to engage with Earth space, inner space, and outer space, all part of this interaction of the transmutation space and that bountiful space, which takes us to that graceful space, that greater oneness that we've been trying for 526 knowledge seeker workshops in a row. That's over 10 years now, trying to transcend the limitations of nuclear science and introducing the plasma science. And we're calling all plasma research teams to convene. This is the Keshe Foundation, Spaceship Institute, teachings on plasma science, welcoming all the beautiful knowledge seekers. There's a World Peace Treaty. Sign it. Sign it sincerely. Is man cornered in a two-dimensional universe? Can man find heaven through the field transmission of vertical motion with the guidance of forward motion and perpendicular rotation? But we're constantly searching for the heartbeat frequency of truth. coexistence and motion are foundational for transmission. Plasma science needs to continue to be delivered daily in exchange for peace on Earth. So, welcome to the new outer space age. And not only is this the end of the lesson, but this is the end of the intermediate transmission series. So thank you very much for allowing me to present, and I hope you enjoyed this trip. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Alex. Let's see if we can get some feedback from our participants. Joseph had put in the chat earlier, without GAN's production, most products are obsolete. Or are the products we know further supported? Joseph, do you want to elaborate? Maybe we can open that question up if you're still here. Okay, no problem. How about any of the other participants? Would you like to raise a question, or does Alex need to water this teaching down further so that an interaction happens?
Well, remember, Mark, that most of the panel here are mature students, and they have a deeper understanding. We have to understand that the purpose of this whole thing is to try and somehow take the seriously advanced teachings of Mr. Kesh in the Knowledge Seekers workshops and try and make it easier for new knowledge seekers to learn. There are a few fundamental things that I've had to go through. Well, the purpose of it, of course, is that there are a lot of things that we learned that were wrong, and they were limiting, and they're still taught today. And in fact, they're even more limiting today, simply because they have stopped any progress in the science. So, you know, I could say as a senior citizen that, you know, the hopes and aspirations that I had as a teenager have in many ways not been fulfilled from a technological standpoint, because the quality of our life has diminished. How can it be possible that the technology is advancing and the quality of life is diminishing? Unless there's this relationship where the rate of diminishing of quality and the rate of increase of technology is constant. Well, that could be. And so there are many who work on that basis. But fortunately, we weren't born with that attitude and that knowledge. So the question is what attitude, what knowledge were we born with? And as Mr. Kesh has stated quite clearly in English, easy to be translated, we were born with all the knowledge that we need. And all the knowledge that we need is the knowledge of the universe. So how can we be selective of that knowledge? And how can we determine when it's appropriate to be so selective? We have to make this decision if we go to a, shall we say, Chinese buffet. There's one in Toronto. They have maybe 200 different dishes of food there, way more than I can eat. And so I like it all, but I can't eat it all. So I have to be very selective. But is my selection today going to be the same as my selection next week? there is a prejudice. I had a meal there last month and I liked it. And so maybe I'd like to have it again, or maybe I'd like to explore. So in that regard, we have choices. But when we say we don't have any choice, the reason we don't have any choice is because our motion and our coexistence are beyond our choice. The choice to move is only when and where to move, not the ability to move. So if we are in the process of limiting our coexistence and limiting our motion, well, that is a choice that is in an earthbound reality. And so many of us are stuck in traffic because we have to coexist. We have to, well, go along to get along. But now we have an opportunity to have different choices. So where we can maintain our motion and we can maintain our coexistence. Because when I was a teenager, I was engaged in a coexistence and emotion, even though I didn't understand it, uneducated, too young to know any better, I guess, except I was of the belief that as we grew older, as we had the technology, that the quality of life would improve. And for some, you could say, yes, it has, but it's a very small percentage overall. And so when you analyze that and you say, well, was the quality of life a competition and that someone was winning and the rest of us are losers? Well, we don't have to choose that anymore. We have no choice. We're all winners. We're all winners. And that winning started 20 years ago in earnest. And we're all part of it. We're part of the new transmission. And so please enjoy the journey because the quality of life will definitely improve. Over to you, Mark.
Okay, let's go back to our participants. We're hoping you'll share some of your thoughts or ideas of what Alex covered, or perhaps something Alex didn't cover that you're interested in. I think he has a wide scope of understanding and be happy to address your issues, concerns, or questions.
So I want to thank everybody for allowing me to continue to present. I mean this sincerely. This is a real honor and a privilege, and it's definitely challenging. But we're all being challenged, and that challenge is an annealing process. And in terms of annealing, that's a strengthening process. So we're all gaining in field strength as a result of it. The most important thing that we need to take away from this whole thing is that we have limitations imposed, and those limitations are being dissolved. So anytime when we decide who we are and what we are, is an imposition of a limitation. So look at the bigger scheme, and you'll find that you'll be bigger still, and you'll have more field strength and be able to do more, be more, and be more effective in your transmission. So now we know that there aren't any boundaries in that regard. So look forward to a very, very exciting future. And remember where you were once we crossed the watershed. And you're all part of that new group of pioneers, shall we say. What a wonderful journey. So thanks again, everybody.
Thank you. Back to the enhancement unit where we saw the fella in Linz trying to pick up stones on the moon. The arm was moving and so forth. Is this coexistence of positioning? Wasn't he on the moon at same time in the enhancement unit? Mr. Kesh said if we had a special container, he could have manifested the rocks. He could have put them in the container in the universal unit, and the material that he was picking up would have manifested, but you need a special container for that. But is that the coexistence positioning where he was in the unit? We saw him physically in the unit, and then we saw his arm moving, and he described himself picking up stones on the moon. So obviously he had some what appeared to be physicality on the moon, but it was in the dimension of energy. His actual physicality was in the unit. So is this coexistence positioning?
Yes. Yeah, and now you're going to say, oh, this is above my pay grade. No, you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. Right. So again, if the universe exists within us, do we have to go anywhere physically? I know everybody wants to transmute and move it, but if 95% of the universe is in energy dimension, you're missing it. Oh, here's another question. You saw the video from NASA with these entities.
Okay.
You saw that, right?
Yeah.
So Mr. Kesh said they hadn't taken on physicality. That's they take, absorb, and give off lots of energy and so on, but they never took the dimension of physicality. How could we see them? I think I know the answer. How could we see them if they have no physicality? What was the light reflecting off an energy pack? I think the answer is in the amino acids, but how could we see them if they took no dimension of physicality? How could NASA record them if they have no dimension of physicality, but they were just in the energy dimension? He said they didn't take on physicality. That's one of the reasons. And they're highly intelligent and live hundreds of thousands of years, and we're dependent on them. We're sort of under their shadow in a way, but how could we see them if they were in the dimension of energy and no physicality? What were we seeing?
Okay, before I answer that question, you suggested that you knew the answer.
Yep.
Would you like to offer that answer so that I can dissect it?
Yeah, we're in the same amino acid strength as they are. Mr. Kesh explained it. He said it's the same amino acid as the fish, the same amino acid as us, and they have the same amino acid structure. So this allows us, apparently, I mean, I'm just guessing, that we could see them in the dimension of energy because we're in the same amino acid strength. Could that be?
Okay, Mark. So you have the field strength of the soul, right?
No, the amino acid strength. of the entities. That's why we're able to look at them in the dimension of energy.
Yeah, but first of all, before you
Okay.
look at them, they have to have a dimension of the soul.
Well, yeah, everything has a soul.
Right. Okay. And the fact that you could see them meant that there was some kind of physicality. So,
Well, he said they didn't take on any physicality.
well, you saw them though. And then
Right.
seeing is part of physicality. Seeing is part of the physical matter state. Okay. So what I'm saying to you,
Are you sure about that?
100%, buddy.
Okay.
If you look at the soul, and if you look at the physicality, can you tell me what is missing?
As I understand it, they did not have any, they haven't taken on any physicality.
No, but you've seen
The energy spectrum at our amino acid level.
right. Okay, so I'll repeat. They had a soul, and they had a manifestation of physicality. What is missing?
They didn't. We saw them in the dimension of energy because their
Yeah,
amino
but that
acid
dimension
is
of energy was in physicality.
okay.
No, I'm
Again,
really
just an anomaly, just a small anomaly.
small anomaly, not really huge anomaly, because I'm gonna, put you down this funnel here. Okay, so we're going from a satellite down to an earthworm. Okay, so what's missing? You have the soul and the physicality. What's missing?
Does it start with an E?
No, it starts with a soul.
I was thinking emotion, but I'm sure they have emotion.
Yeah, but emotion is part of the energy. I'm talking about a manifestation. So, if I may, it's a tough question. So, and it's a good question that you're asking.
All right, wait. I was just thinking, when you see an apparition or a ghost, does that have any physicality? But you're
Yeah,
still seeing it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But what is it?
It's in the same amino acid spectrum as you have. He said they had the same amino acid as the
Yes,
fish
but
in the sea and us, so that's why we can see them in the dimension of energy. Perhaps. Just guessing.
okay. Maybe I'm being a little too harsh with you. The soul of the body is what's missing, because the manifestation of the physicality is the inertia field of the soul and the soul of the body. Do we agree?
You better slow that down and say it again. You said the soul of physicality is missing.
Right.
They haven't taken on a physicality ever. So there
No,
wouldn't be any
they haven't
physicality.
taken on a physicality,
Mhm.
but what we're seeing is a physicality.
I disagree.
Well, you can't see it if it isn't physical.
If it's at the same amino acid strength, I think you can.
Right.
Obviously, if they haven't taken on a physicality and they're in the dimension of energy and you're seeing it, it's because your amino acids and their amino acids are on the same field strength.
Correct. Correct. And now you know that the body has something that is similar. It's called an aura. And we can see that with the Kirlian photography. Right? So you can't see the physicality, but you can see the aura. So the aura is the representative of the energy of the soul of the body.
But you said they have no soul of physicality. Didn't
No,
you,
I
or
said
did
they
I
have,
say that? You said they had
you
a
said
soul of
that.
physicality.
They have a soul of physicality. We just agreed that they didn't have a physicality.
Mhm. Okay, no problem. Probably needs to
Okay,
be
so
opened up further.
yeah, well, I put you in a corner on
No,
that.
you didn't. No, not at all.
Well, it's we have to understand that there's a difference. So if you were looking at the soul, it's non-visible. If you're looking at the soul of the body, it's non-visible. But if that soul of the body is interacting with the environment, then you can see that aura. So it hasn't manifested in physicality,
So
but the
you're
aura,
saying we're seeing an aura. We're not seeing the
that's what
actual
I'm saying.
entity.
That's correct. And the reason I wanted to say that to you is because according to that video, and I'm really glad that you brought up that video. I mean, you and I, let's make sure that everybody in this panel understands, did not plan this. Okay, you put that video directly in front of my video, and here is the slide that is representative of that video. Okay, now how do we communicate that? Okay, now when you look at the one thing that I didn't discuss on this slide, I discussed the ships and the planes and the satellites, but I did not discuss these spirits. And why are these spirits at that level? You don't see them out of an airplane. You don't see them out of a warplane. And maybe without a special camera, you wouldn't be able to see them. But in a satellite, NASA was able to see them. So they're in a specific location and a specific range between the uh, path that a warplane would take and the path that a satellite would take. What's in that path?
Anyone?
And yeah, I was just going to say, anyone hazard a guess? Okay,
Inertia?
so let's make a definitive statement here. This is the peace dome. This is the convergence point. This is the magnetically stable point between the sun and the earth and the creator. The peace dome is the home. It's the convergence point. These souls have now manifested into the physicality. They've come as close as they dare. It's the rest of us here who manifest into the physicality. And what happens as a result? We have to dumb down, reduce in field strength. To manifest in the physicality, we had to reduce in field strength to come into this Earth space landing point. They are within our sphere of influence, shall we say, but they are not in physicality. And so NASA has maybe accidentally proven that it's there. So, when you say seeing is believing, anyone who's clairvoyant can see an aura. So,
So that's off the physicality, isn't it? The aura is
right.
coming off the physicality, but they don't have that dimension of physicality. But
Well,
anyway,
the field strength of the physicality, they just haven't, what do you call it, diluted into the field of physicality. They're just, representing that physicality. Why would that physicality, shall we say, that aura of physicality, why would that manifest? Because it is interacting with the field strength of the planet and its peace dome. That's why. In order for us to manifest in physicality, we have to interact with another field. That's the reason we are in the physicality, because the earth is in the physicality. So, we can't manifest in the physicality if earth is not here. Earth has to be here first. So that's why you cannot depend on, this dimension that we have on this plane. You can depend on man. And for centuries, man was at the center of the universe. Because if you were to say that man was not at the center of the universe, I think you were beheaded or something like that, something very ungraceful. So, we call that censorship, right? So it was at some point that man decided, well, the earth was at the center of the universe. And then that was wrong because they realized that the sun was at the center of the universe. Because if the earth was at the center of the universe, then the planets would all collide. So someone figured out, but they had to be very secretive about that because that too was heresy. So, this all had to do with the forms of censorship, which were limitations on the knowledge. Well, now we're transcending this knowledge. So we know about the Kirlian photography, and we know that it's an aura, and we have people who are clairvoyants, and they can actually see these souls in the upper atmosphere. Because a clairvoyant can actually see the soul, and a clairvoyant can see different colors of the soul. And if he can see different colors, that means those colors are in the physicality. And you can see the change of those colors because those colors are affected by the emotion. So the emotion affects the wavelength and the frequency of that energy field. And as such, it changes the color. And so the color can change whatever it is. So, if it's red, you're lying. And if you're, ultraviolet, well, you are sincere. And so a clairvoyant can see that. And so if they see you coming, they will do one or two things. They will step aside and let you pass, or they will stick out a hand and say, "Hi, friend," and shake your hand. And then you have to ask yourself, well, gee, how did they know that? Well, because they could see the energy emanating from your soul, and the soul will never lie. And so this is it's not a revelation. It's not really ground shaking. It's only upsetting to people who discount this. And so, if you are flying in a warplane or you're flying in a satellite, you are feedback dominant. You are physically dominant. And then you engage with these souls and they show you their aura and you say, oh, well, that's foo-foo powder or something. So I never questioned when this came. What I wanted to understand was the position. And I could never understand that position until I understood that the physical position was determined by an engagement with an environment. And so that environment is Earth. So that area there, it's not magnetical and it's not gravitational. It's in a balance point, and that balance point is invisible. If you go above it, you're magnetical. If you go below it, you're gravitational. And so that's why warplanes can only fly so high. They fly higher than commercial planes, but they only fly so high. Then if they exceed that speed, then they may go into the level with the satellites. And if they continue, they'll go outside of that, and that's considered a rocket. And so we have decided to travel between magravs, well, let's say the Earth and the Moon, and we use a rocket. But we had to go through the Peace Dome, and we had to go through this plane where we have all of these souls. See, the question that we're answering today is what's going on there, and why is it going on, and why there, right? But I have other questions. And that question is, I mean, if we get together for a Zoom meeting, we're all here together. And if you go, say, to the mall, everybody's walking around, and you don't really hit each other unless you're careless. But you can navigate through that with your own path, even though it may be a crooked line. But everybody's kind of milling around, and it's not what you would call a group session. So what I was noticing with all those souls is that they just seem to be milling around. So what's hard for me to understand, and I'm only limiting it to that point of view, is what exactly are they doing? They're not bowling, they're not watching TV, they're not playing video games, they're not having a coffee in a coffee shop. And yet they're more intelligent than we are. They are happier than we are. They're more peaceful than we are. And
They have a brain, they have a kidney, they have a
yeah,
liver,
yeah.
but never taken the dimension of physicality. So they have an energy structure. Could I share your screen with you?
Yes, you want me to stop sharing?
No, I'm gonna just take over. Randy sent a couple of pictures, and let's
Yes,
see if
Mark,
we can put these up
because
here and get some comment. Alex, did you get to finish your thought before we go to this? I just thought I'd bring these up.
Oh no, I definitely did. As I say, I've with that last question, I've kind of gone beyond, the topic that we've been talking about. But the purpose of this slide here was to answer your question, but that brought on more questions for me, and I just wanted to throw that out to you. So maybe you can ponder that and answer that to me next time.
I'll laugh along with you. Go ahead, Randy. Can we have
okay, these are pictures of the full moon. You don't see this with your physical eyes. You don't see what you see in these two pictures. Now, the interesting thing I'd like to ask Alex is, I put a small Kesh butterfly on the back of my cell phone. So is the butterfly changing the ability of the cell phone to capture different dimensions? Because if you just look in the sky that night, all you seen was the full moon, but you didn't see that purple aura or all the other energy things that are in the sky.
I don't really know the answer to that question because there's one factor that's missing. What would the picture look like without the butterfly?
You don't see any, all you'd see is just a black moon. Just let me see if I can find another one.
Oh, so what you're
Yeah,
saying
we'll
is,
put it right next to it. in
Yeah.
front of it. Okay.
so Randy, what you're saying is that what you see with the naked eye and what you see with the camera would be the same. But
No,
once you,
it's totally different. You don't see that. You don't see that purple in the picture on the left. You don't see that purple Pete around the moon. Then I'll send Mark the video.
no, Randy, you said that you don't see that purple thing with your naked eye.
No, you don't.
Okay, and
You
so
don't.
if you were to take the butterfly off and take that picture, you're also saying you wouldn't see the purple.
I don't know because I've never done that.
Ah, okay. Well, that was the one question that it was missing in order
So
for me
then
to answer the
I will
question.
send Mark the video now.
Okay.
Because the
That
question, as
was
I understand it, is what you were asking, was the butterfly causing this purple emission? Is that the question?
that's the question I'm asking because is it causing and to create an energy field around those lenses to pick up I wouldn't say it's not invisible because it is there, but it's not on the frequency of our eyes.
And there you have it.
These were all taken, I took the still pictures first, then I took the video. Same camera.
There seems to be a faint, I'm just going to call it aura, that is running totally around the moon as well, and it's still there, but it's not as obvious as what it was before.
No, and that's the thing that I was surprised at when I come in the house and looked at it. The fact that the video, I thought, oh, I'll get more with the video, and then but the sky's black. Yet when you took the skills,
Randy,
yes, Elias.
have you checked the ISO ratings of your video versus the ISO ratings of your still on your camera?
Oh, now
Because
you're
the-
talking now you're talking a language I don't know. How would
Yeah.
I check that in my phone?
You go to your settings, and then your phone should have the ISO. The ISO is basically the shutter speed and sensitivity of the lens that captures the light. So the ISO settings should be the same, identical in both. And when that happens, the amount of light shining on your sensor will be equal. So then you can make oranges with oranges, apples with
to
apples comparison.
Yep.
Yeah. So check your ISO, check your shutter speed, make sure they're the same, and then you can compare the two and see any differences.
Yeah, but
Where do I
was
find
this-
those settings? When I turn the camera on, or do they list it in like the settings?
It should be under settings. Now, again, not all smartphones have that, depending on the app. Some apps, especially the more advanced ones, will have those settings, whereas the apps that come with your phone normally don't have it because most people don't need them. Because a lot of these smart phones have auto, and under auto, it sets the ISO dynamically, so you don't need to bother. But you need to set your camera on manual. Once you do that, you can play around with the settings. But then again, it all depends on your app. So if that's not available, if you really want to do it scientifically, just get a camera. Get any digital camera, set it to manual, and then go to your settings and then make sure that the ISO setting is the same for video and also the same for still pictures. So any digital camera should be able to do that for you if your smartphone doesn't have that facility.
Now,
Okay.
were these pictures taken before or after the lander tipped over? I think one of the legs ended up in a small crater or something and they didn't realize it. And it became unstable, perhaps. Obviously, it wasn't a solid landing position. I think there was some depressions or something that they didn't foresee. Again, I'm just guessing.
Well, it only had 6 legs.
Right, right. Yeah, that should have been more stable, but again, we don't know exactly, and there's no real wind on the moon, is there? To sort of push it over. But fields can do some interesting things as well. Maybe Santa Claus was there, I don't know. Okay. Anything else on these beautiful photos? Obviously, this is a place that'll be colonized in the very near future. Probably could happen in the next 24 months, but depending on how the Chinese government, I know they're talking 2030, Mr. Kesh says it can be done much sooner. And maybe some of us will actually be there. He did say, jokingly, I think, but he did say we'd have the champagne ready when they arrived.
You're very confident that that will be the case, that the moon will be colonized first? You're confident?
This is the what Mr. Kesh had verbalized. But again, things, you know, we were going to capture CO2 and then we're not capturing CO2. So things can change again.
Well, the question that I want to ask is, it's been over 50 years since we've sent a vehicle. Why?
Some people say we were warned off of the moon.
Okay, so that's a good reason.
Maybe there are space programs that are already there. This is just for public consumption.
Oh, yeah, so many possibilities, right?
Mm-hmm. 100%.
Well,
100%.
this is why when we start dealing with the soul, we start dealing with the truth. Okay, because that's just the way it is in the universe. So I think the gamesmanship, you know, in the beginning was fun. So, you know, I think if you're playing a soccer game or any kind of game, you know, it's fun, it's entertainment. But you know, to play war, yeah, that may excite the, you know, emotional juices, but it's not fun. Well, it's only fun as long as, I guess, you're alive, and it's only fun if you don't get wounded. Actually, you know, getting wounded is probably worse than getting killed, because now you have to live the good life. It is not contributing to the quality of your life, and it's not contributing to the quality of life on this planet. So I submit that, you know, what you were showing there in that video, these are all the beings that are contributing to the welfare of this planet. And every night we engage with them. And sometimes we listen, but most times we don't. We just tell the soul to shut up and mind its own business, and insist on being the dominant feedback physicality. So this is the message that we're trying to do, so that we can differentiate between the plasma reality and the physical reality. And all of us need to be able to convey that Well, first of all, we need to understand that. And once we understand that, then we need to be able to convey that to others. And we need to teach them. And we need to do it in our own way. So for some people, they'll always ask why? And it's nice to have more and more answers. But what is really confidence building, and I didn't totally understand that, like the way it was described in the last little bit. We're born with this knowledge, so we don't have to search for it. We just have to trust that it's there and that it'll come to us when we need it. But we need to have more faith in that than we have in our own physicality, and understand that our physicality has a purpose. So this is a message that we have to convey to the rest of the people, because in too many cases, the majority of people are experiencing a meaningless and purposeless existence. And that is a sad state of affairs. And it's a wasteful it's a wasteful product of good energy. And this earth needs our good energy. And we all need it too. So this is the new outer space age. So thanks again, everybody. And thanks, Brandy, Mark, and Diane, and the whole team.
Okay, I just thought I'd read this. You talk about it's for you and really nobody else. Now, this brings into focus a lot of teachings of the past. They're all coming together to give you time, place, position, manifestation, transportation, transmutation, and everything else that is in your hand. And no one can touch it. No one can reach you with it unless they want to find a way to steal it from you. In a way, taking it from you or connecting to you to use your resources than theirs. Anyone want to explain this? As he said, it's for you to find it within yourself, not anyone else. And it's all what this knowledge, as you say, Alex, means to you. And there are no wrong positions. I don't think one star says to the other star, you're not shining bright enough, or you're in the wrong position. What are you doing there? This is my space, or change your color, and so on and so forth. We were just showing the pictures that Randy had shared with us, and looking for some sort of anomaly or explanation. But as we heard from another participant, that you kind of have to have it set up in a certain way that all the settings are very similar. Again, I'm not very good with these mechanisms, so. But thank you for sharing, Randy. They are beautiful pictures, and I'm sure we'll be there in the next number of years in one way or the other, not taking any copper or cement or any of the other things that you would think you would need to colonize, as Mr. Kesh will be teaching the creation of the fields to create domes. But again, this has to be taught. I think the C60 is involved in that. But there's so much more. We're just scratching the surface. Yes? Anyone? Selena, I notice you just came in. Is there something you'd like to share? You always seem to have a dream or a story or something you wanted to share.
Yeah, last week I shared my dream in Keshe teaching. I never go there because a lot of people watch those. I want to hide.
You're a little shy?
Yeah. And those are not for those plays, you know, the channels problem, those kinds of stuff. So whatever we are doing, where we are going, it is I already explained little by little, right? Step by step, little here, little there. If I everything take together like a Bengali teaching, and your players, and here and there, then Rick players. So there is a lot of information. Whatever happening with me, uh, and whatever Mr. Cash is talking about, the same thing, almost same thing. Almost not the same thing.
Do you like the idea of the new material being released, this cosmic ray plasmatic material? I don't know if you happen to see that.
Yeah, I did.
You did?
Yeah, everything helps. Everything helps. What the enhancement machine, whatever it is trying to give us, it helps. But you have to remember first, everything with us. And these are tools to help go there. If you try yourself, you can go anywhere. And I never try anything. I never read Mr. Cash's book, but I understand, and it's happening to me. I am not a special person. I don't do anything. Just do sometimes meditation if I get time. And my heart is open, and I feel everything is mine. And in Bengali teaching, I always say everything is mine, and I am everybody's. So I feel that, and I say that thing, that sentence.
We did cover that. He said, if you understand the teachings, you can create a transmutation system without matter state and without Ganses. But if you're not able to achieve that, he said, we have an offer for you. And it does sound like this offer is almost like an easy pass. He compared it to some sort of toll where you need to have the right combination to go through the toll or to pay the toll. And I think this material is like, in a way, an easy pass. They have that so people don't have to get and make change and find the right. You just sort of drive right through. And apparently this is going to bring some even more phenomenal changes beyond our imagination. We'll have to see when people come back from Sanya. I think they'll be exposed to some of this material probably before it actually arrives at anyone's place. So we'll probably hear a lot from the people that were there.
Yeah, we'll see a lot of people, getting this experience.
But it's just another game changer. And he said this is only one material, and there'll be combinations of materials, I think, offered depending on which part of the universe you'd like to connect to.
Yeah. Another thing, see that way. We are part of God, but we are made from God particle, right? We are part of God.
I am you. Yeah, he said, it's me. You just put some skin and some physicality and some lipstick on it.
Right,
it's me.
Yeah. So we have everything. So
agree.
The God start. There is no beginning. There is no ending. Right? We are always there. And
well,
everywhere.
There was a beginning, I think he mentioned, but there is no ending. You're correct.
Yeah. So we are everywhere. So if we want to go somewhere else, why shouldn't go? We can go because we have the blueprint with us. So
you're doing it every night. We're all doing it every night. We're calling it something else, but it's the work of the soul.
Right. So just looking different way. We are so close, and the structure, everything, like the education system and the religious system, all systems, they are making us to not believe that.
Isn't that a concerted effort? People say they don't believe in conspiracies, but I think you just pointed out a few.
Yeah. So if we leave those, so we can do everything.
Agree. No limitations at all.
Yeah. That is. Thank you.
Very good. Is there any other participants or panelists who'd like to bring something up for Alex or any other parts we may have missed that you'd like to share? And again, if it's on the tip of your tongue, I think it's good to share it, but it's up to you. I know I've done that a number of times and then hear it brought up later, and I said, gee, I could have shared something about that earlier.
I would just like to tie up a couple of loose ends that you brought up, Mark. Well, one was the camera work that Randy produced. We have seen that with the naked eye as well, but you know, we because we've never had an explanation, we've never noticed it, or we haven't commented, or you know, when we were younger, we didn't have the social networking to be able to communicate with other people and say, oh, well, did you see this here? Take a picture of this and I'll show you that. So in that way, the technology has shown us that there's some other anomalies that are out there, and they do need explaining because they're there. We can clearly see them. But the other thing is that regardless of which calendar you look at, so, you know, whether you're saying, you know, our humanity is only 6,000 years or 12,000 years old or whatever, and the question becomes as to why we need the cache technology. And so if we talk about many of the, you know, beings that we look up to, okay, like Buddha, God, or I mean Jesus, Muhammad, you know, they weren't able to do it, and there's a reason why, and one of the ways, or one of the reasons why, is because they didn't want to interfere, and it appeared as if it was magic, and as Mr. Cash says, if it's magic, you know, you don't believe it. But the point that I want to make is that regardless of who the religion was or who the belief system was, we've never been able to accomplish it, and after thousands of years. So, you know, if you keep doing the same thing and expect different results, we understand that that's a failure. So we have to try something different. And the question is this a theory or is this a fact? Does it work? Have we achieved that? And of course, you can be pretty certain that within our generation, it has come about. We can be pretty certain that it has come about in fits and starts previous to that. But the other thing that we're very, very certain of is the censorship and the disavowing of the knowledge and just basically trying to sweep it under the carpet. So in one way or another, there's always been some form of suppression, and for some kind of ulterior motive. So without having to add to that, the point of the matter is that it hasn't happened. So now we're doing something different. And we are definitely, when you do something different, you're expecting different results. So you can say, oh, well, we don't really need it, but all along we didn't really need it. And pretty much all along we didn't do it. So we don't need to ask the question if we need it. Well, now we have it, and now we can use it, and now we can bring it into well, we need to bring that into our daily existence is what we need to do. Okay, and we need to do that in a very graceful way. And that's kind of the key. And the ticket for that is really in the Peace Dome, because the Peace Dome connects all the souls around this planet who have good intentions and love for this planet, and the planet itself that has its own self-love, and of course all the souls around the planet who are desperately seeking world peace, happiness, prosperity, and goodwill to all mankind and beyond. And now we know that there is a beyond, because the beyond already knows about us. It's just a matter of us acknowledging that. So that's the meaning and the purpose of what we're doing. And if that isn't exciting, I don't know. Over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you,
want to
Alex.
say
Of
hello,
course.
Alex, and hello, Mark, and hello, everybody. I didn't come. Long time no seen. So I missed you. I opened the Zoom. I was thinking, oh, they're still there or not. So I'm lucky. I'm glad I got it.
Good. Nice to hear your
Thank you.
voice as well. Thank you for sharing today.
Thank you.
And just remember, we have the One Planet, One Nation, One Race on Tuesday in the public Zoom room. And you're all invited and you're all part of that. On Wednesday, of course, is the reactor group, KESH Plasma Reactor Group, in the same Zoom room, or now on Vimeo. I think a live stream has been absorbed into Vimeo, so you can go to the Vimeo, and the playback is much, much better. There's very little buffering. At least that was my experience so far. I know the live stream used to really tangle me up in trying to play through an archived video, but we don't seem to have that with Vimeo. So you can join the KESH Plasma Reactor Group at Wednesday, 7 a.m. Central European Time. You can bring your questions, you can bring your systems or anything you've created, or any other subject. Rick has a far-reaching program where we can discuss almost anything, normally in connection with the plasma technology, but not always. And then, of course, on Thursday at usually 9 a.m. Central European Time in the public Zoom room, or again on Vimeo or YouTube, you can hear the Knowledge Seekers Workshop. You can also go on our YouTube channel and review a number of the videos there. Of course, on Friday, we have the Brazilian teaching. As we reviewed, you can join them for daily intentions or the intention on Wednesday at 6 p.m. CET time. And the usual first weekend of every month, which is coming up not this Saturday, I don't think, but the following Saturday, you have the, well, wait a minute, let me just check the calendar. I think it would be this, wouldn't it be this? Yes, this coming Saturday, you have a question and answer with Marie and Claudia, question and answer from the Universal Council. So you can join them on YouTube as well. And so there's many offerings in the other language communities, in the Italian, in the German, in the Dutch, and so on and so forth. So there's many opportunities for you to interact. You can find all those things probably on the social medias, if I understand it. But here's a message for all of you. May you be proud of the work you do, the person you are, and the difference you make. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to play another video that Alex has voiced over. I think it was created by the Brazilian team. And it'll help you understand more about keeping KESH Foundation free for humanity. Become a trial volunteer. And of course, you can volunteer on the website and join some of these sessions. Yes, you have to pay for research, you have to pay for the sessions, but this will be explained in the video. And then I'll play the final disclaimer and the meeting will come to an end. So this video will last about 7 minutes. Feel free to share it, pass it around into your networks, wherever it may go. Because again, we don't want to tie the foundation's hands with $1 billion to pay scientists and years and years and years of research to get anything out. So that's why Mr. Kesh has taken it in this way. So you can all be part of that. And we thank you again for being here today. Thank you, Alex, and everyone else who've participated on the matter state level or on the silent line of communication, which is a beautiful way. You'll probably won't hear too many voices out in the universe, but it'll all be conveyed by emotional impressions.